At 4 a.m., a faint light from the dawn filtered through the curtains. In my drowsy state, I noticed my husband Scott getting up and leaving the room. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear what sounded like a newspaper delivery motorcycle. Between those sounds, I heard Scott's footsteps as he quietly made his way up to the second floor. Strange, why was Scott going upstairs? The second floor only had our clothes storage room and our granddaughter Pamela's room. I was still half asleep at the time, and thinking Scott had just gotten up to use the bathroom, I didn't pay it much mind and drifted back to sleep. The next time I woke up was when my bedside alarm clock rang. It was a typical morning, a typical Sunday. It was my day off work, and I was doing household chores from early morning. Scott emerged from the bedroom, changed into his jogging clothes, and started doing simple stretches at the edge of the living room. "Hey, weren't you up really early?" I asked. "Huh? Oh, yes, I just woke up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night." "Didn't you go to Pamela's room after that?" "It was around 4 a.m., wasn't it?" Scott wouldn't look at me. After finishing his lower back stretches, he hurriedly left the house. As he left, Pamela came down from the second floor. Her bangs had grown long enough to cover her eyes, and the dark circles under her eyes were noticeable. "Good morning." "Hey, did your grandfather come to your room this morning?" "Oh, yes." "I'm sorry." Why was she apologizing? Pamela sat in a chair, hunching her shoulders, staring at the empty table. She looked tired. Sensing it wasn't the right time to talk, I silently placed a cup of coffee in front of her. Then I headed to the washroom and started checking the laundry basket item by item. This was my habit. If there were tissues left in pockets, it would be a disaster. However, when I picked up the pajamas from the basket, I froze. "What's this?" "My name is Jeanette. I live with my husband Scott and our high school-aged granddaughter Pamela. Pamela lives with us because her parents have passed away. Scott and I were both cram school teachers, and that's where we fell in love. When we first met, Scott often told me about how much he had struggled academically in his younger days. He spoke passionately about putting his heart into teaching students, not wanting them to repeat his mistakes. "I don't care if they hate me. But the mental strength they gain from strict guidance will definitely serve them well in society," he would say. He often yelled at his students. Making them stay at the cram school until they solved problems was a regular occurrence. If they forgot their homework, he would scold them with a thundering voice. Back then, in my younger days, I saw Scott as a wonderful person who truly cared about his students. However, 14 years ago, a complaint came in from the parent of one of Scott's students. The head of the cram school apparently called Scott in and told him, "Your teaching methods are excessive." In the end, Scott couldn't defend himself and was forced to quit. He tried to find new employment, but no place seemed willing to recognize his talents. Scott was 54 at the time. Perhaps he lacked the courage to try a different field. Eventually, he gave up job hunting and became a shut-in. I couldn't bring myself to blame Scott, and just wanted to support him. It was painful to see him sitting on the sofa with a lifeless expression, just staring at the wall. But we needed to earn money to live. While Scott was in his depression, I went back to teaching at the cram school to support our household. What saved Scott from his depression was the presence of our granddaughter, Pamela. 10 years ago, we lost our son and his wife in a tragic accident. Pamela, who was only 4 at the time, couldn't understand that her parents were gone and cried almost every night. I didn't know what words to offer her, and just spent those sleepless nights with her. In the quiet of night, we would look at butterfly encyclopedias together. Pamela loved butterfly encyclopedias, and the image of her desperately studying them while tears fell onto the pages is burned into my memory. There are so many different butterflies. They're beautiful, aren't they? At that time, looking at butterfly encyclopedias together was all I could think of to help distract Pamela from her grief and pain. Perhaps due to the emotional trauma of losing her parents, Pamela often couldn't attend school. There's no need to force yourself to go to school. I can teach you, Scott had said, probably meaning it lightly at first. From elementary through middle school, on days when Pamela couldn't go to school, Scott would teach her. Pamela was a quiet girl who didn't talk much. She was obedient and honest. Losing our son and his wife in the accident at the same time was truly a tragic event. However, I felt that for Scott, Pamela had become his new reason for living. When I would come home at night after work, the living room was always empty. If I quietly approached Pamela's room on the second floor, I could hear Scott's voice softly teaching her. Now, listen. This problem is an application of this equation. Although I couldn't see Scott's expression through the door, I could tell from the energy in his voice that he was full of life. I would start preparing dinner. The kitchen was always spotlessly clean. Scott cleaned every corner of the house. I would take out a frying pan and start cooking. Around the time the appetizing aroma filled the room, Scott would come downstairs with Pamela. Scott always had an enthusiastic expression, which truly put me at ease. Jeanette, listen. Pamela has a great memory and understanding. She could definitely become a scholar in the future. Wow! That's amazing, Pamela. Good job. Pamela would hide her eyes behind her slightly long bangs and look down shyly. I believed these happy days would continue forever. However, when Pamela entered her second year of high school, the atmosphere in the house gradually changed. If you can't even solve a problem like this, you'll definitely fail the entrance exams. Scott's angry shouts were loud enough to hear even downstairs. He was teaching Pamela in her room. Now in high school, Pamela was still quiet and somewhat withdrawn, but she attended school regularly. She went to a locally famous high school and her grades weren't bad. Both Scott and I had certain expectations for her future. Wrong. That's not it. Look at the problem carefully. Feeling a bit worried, I went upstairs and knocked on Pamela's door. Scott, not Pamela, opened the door asking, "What is it? What's wrong?" So I somewhat hesitantly entered the room. I saw Pamela hunched over her desk, her face close to her notebook. Her back seemed to radiate exhaustion, and I couldn't help but suggest, "Why don't you take a break?" After a moment's hesitation, Scott told Pamela, "Let's take a break," and we all went down to the living room. I had prepared shortcake, which Pamela loved. Coffee was already brewed, and Scott, immediately taking a sip from his cup upon sitting down, let out an almost exaggerated sigh. This is the crucial moment, Pamela. When you're young, your body can handle pushing yourself. Study hard even if it's tough, get into a top university. After that, join a top company, and a bright future awaits. I quietly took a sip from my coffee mug. A bright future. I don't think what Scott was saying was wrong. But when I think about the feelings behind his passionate words, it makes me a bit sad. Scott never graduated from university. I know he feels insecure about this. Even when he was teaching at the cram school, he often mentioned that he had the lowest academic credentials among the teachers. He doesn't want our precious granddaughter Pamela to experience the same kind of humiliation he did. These feelings were conveyed to me alone. Scott's teaching was strict. Although I understood this even without directly experiencing his instruction, with entrance exams approaching, I didn't think to stop him. I think this is the time in life when you study the most. So let's do our best, Pamela. At my words, Pamela just looked down, not responding at all. She didn't reach for her favorite shortcake, just gripping her hands together under the table. Suddenly, I noticed she was biting her lip. "Pamela, what's wrong?" "It's nothing," she said in a slightly hoarse voice. Pamela had always been introverted and struggled to express her feelings well. After eating half of the shortcake, she said she'd save the rest for later and put it in the refrigerator. As Pamela was about to return to her room upstairs with a glass of iced coffee, Scott stopped her. "Solve through problem 20 in the practice problems. I'll check on you in an hour." Pamela didn't reply verbally, just nodding her head to show she understood Scott's request. She seemed a bit down. Come to think of it, Pamela had always loved studying since she was little. She used to proudly show us her perfect test scores with an innocent smile. I thought maybe she was just tired, and planned to take her shopping when I had time to help lift her spirits. One night, I woke up to Scott pulling back the covers and quietly opening the door to the hallway. It was 4 a.m., and a faint light from dawn filtered through the curtains. In my drowsy state, I caught a glimpse of an unsettling gleam in Scott's eyes. Maybe it was just my imagination. But something felt wrong, and I forced my heavy body to sit up. I listened carefully. I heard Scott flush the toilet, and I crawled back under the covers. Oh, he just got up to use the bathroom. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear what sounded like a newspaper delivery motorcycle. Between those sounds, I heard Scott's footsteps as he quietly made his way up to the second floor. Strange, why was Scott going upstairs? The second floor only had our clothes storage room and Pamela's room. What could he be doing up there so early in the morning? As I pondered this with my eyes closed, I drifted back to sleep. The next time I woke up was when my bedside alarm clock rang. I reflexively reached out to stop it. After gently returning the clock that had just finished its duty to its original position, I gazed at Scott's sleeping face beside me. I got up and started preparing breakfast. It was a typical morning, a typical Sunday. Since it was my day off work, I was doing household chores from early morning. Scott made morning jogging his daily routine. He came out of the bedroom, changed into his jogging clothes, and started doing simple stretches at the edge of the living room. I placed the newspaper I'd brought in from outside on the table and casually asked Scott, "Hey, weren't you up really early?" "Huh? Oh, yes, I just woke up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night." "Didn't you go to Pamela's room after that?" "It was around 4 a.m., wasn't it?" Scott wouldn't look at me, continuing his lower back stretches. "I was just checking her studying." "Checking her studying? At 4 a.m.? Question marks floated in my mind, but Scott finished his stretches and hurriedly left the house. As he left, Pamela came down from the second floor. Her bangs had grown long enough to cover her eyes, and the dark circles under her eyes were noticeable. "Hey, were you studying from so early? Are you feeling all right?" "Yes. I'm sorry." Why was she apologizing when I wasn't even scolding her? Pamela sat in a chair, hunching her shoulders, staring at the empty table. She looked tired. She must have just finished studying late into the night and finally gotten a moment's rest. Thinking it might be bothersome to talk too much, I silently placed a cup of coffee in front of her. Then I headed to the washroom and started checking the laundry one piece at a time. This was an old habit. Our late son used to always leave tissues in his pants pockets, which would make a mess of the laundry. Now there's no one who does that anymore, but habits are hard to break. When I picked up Pamela's pajamas, I froze. What's this? There were faint bloodstains like marks on the sleeve of the polka dot pajamas. When I turned them over, there was blood on the back too. I furrowed my brow, pondered for a moment, then threw the clothes into the washing machine. We have a balcony for hanging laundry on the second floor, but thinking it would be hard to climb stairs when we get older, we added a wooden deck to the first floor last year. It's very convenient to be able to hang laundry just by stepping outside the living room window. The wooden deck has different levels, and Pamela was sitting on one of them. Despite the intense summer heat outside, Pamela sat quietly, sweat beading on her neck as she gazed at the garden. The garden was slightly wet. Pamela must have sprinkled some water to help with the heat. "Pamela, aren't you hot? Why don't you come inside?" "No. I'm waiting." "Waiting? For what?" Water droplets sparkled on the neatly trimmed lawn, reflecting the light. I didn't think much of Pamela not answering my question, and after finishing hanging the laundry, I sat down next to her to look at the garden. "Pamela, there was blood on your pajamas. What was that from?" I asked casually. Since it had been hot lately, I thought maybe she had gotten a nosebleed or something similar. But Pamela's expression changed instantly when she heard my question. She looked shocked, then fearfully stared at me, and eventually started trembling while hugging herself. "What? What's wrong? What happened?" Alarmed by Pamela's sudden change, I reached for her shoulder. She twisted her face in pain and pushed my hand away. "Don't touch me." I was just confused, not understanding what was happening. After a while, without saying anything, Pamela rolled up her t-shirt sleeve. "Oh, wait, this is..." Her shoulder area was bruised purple. As she showed me this painful-looking bruise, Pamela began to cry. I immediately embraced her. While we held each other, unable to see each other's faces, Pamela began to tell me in a hoarse voice that Scott had been coming to her room every morning for the past month. Scott's early morning visits to Pamela's room had apparently been happening every day, I just hadn't noticed. He would bring his own handmade practice problems and forbid her from going out until she solved them, scolding her harshly. She confessed that when I was away at work, he would force her to study with an intense tone, and hit her arms and back when she got problems wrong. "It's my fault, I'm sorry. I have to finish the practice problems before Grandpa comes back." When Pamela tried to get up from the deck and return to her room, I instinctively grabbed her arm to stop her. She looked down at me with a frightened expression. I knew Scott was passionate about education. I knew his teaching style was always passionate and tended to push people into corners. But I hadn't noticed the physical abuse. I never imagined he would force studying through violence that left bruises on his own granddaughter's body. Still holding Pamela's arm, I started crying. "How scared you must have been, how painful it must have been." When I imagined how Pamela must have felt sitting at that study desk all this time, tears overflowed. I'm sorry, Pamela. I'm so sorry, I didn't notice until now. Still gripping Pamela's hand, I apologized to her. The wall clock in the living room chimed to mark the hour. I looked up, quickly wiped away my tears and stood up, still holding Pamela's hand, and returned to the living room. I took out my bag and a case containing insurance cards and similar documents from the dresser, then looked Pamela in the eyes and said firmly, "Pamela, let's go." "Where?" "I don't know, but Scott will be back soon. Let's leave the house before then." Pamela looked down, wringing her hands in front of her stomach. Maybe she was confused, not knowing what to do. Maybe she was too scared of Scott's physical punishment to run away, maybe even the thought of escaping frightened her. I put on the brightest expression I could and smiled at Pamela. "It's okay, I'll definitely protect you." And so, Pamela and I left the house with just a few essential belongings. We took a taxi from our house to the station, then changed trains several times to reach a distant town. Accompanied by Pamela, who kept her head down with an anxious expression, we headed to my sister and her husband's house. Before leaving home, I had called my sister and briefly explained the situation. Upon learning what had happened, my usually calm sister's expression darkened as she led Pamela to a separate room to help her calm down. Once Pamela was gone, my sister suddenly showed her anger, muttering, "This is absolutely unforgivable," while clenching her fist. Then she readily agreed that we could stay there as long as we needed. I was deeply grateful to her. My phone vibrated, and looking at the screen, I saw Scott's name displayed. After some hesitation, I decided to answer. "Hey, Jeanette. Where did you go? Pamela's with you, isn't she? She hasn't made any progress with her practice problems. Where are you dragging her around to? Don't you understand what you've done?" I could hear Scott sigh on the other end of the phone. He started speaking in an almost mocking tone, calling Pamela stupid and suggesting we must have run to my sister and her husband's place. "Did Pamela tell you I was violent with her?" "Yes. You used enough violence to leave bruises on her shoulders and back, didn't you? Don't you understand what you've done?" "You're the one who doesn't understand, Jeanette. We don't have children. Pamela is the only one we can rely on in our old age." I was at a loss for words, not understanding what Scott meant. Here was his reasoning: the violence against Pamela was necessary for her to get into a top university, join a prestigious company, and eventually take care of them in their old age with her stable income. He passionately argued that the pain was necessary to make her mentally stronger. I was speechless at his words, which seemed to border on madness. "You hurt Pamela for something like that? We can't discuss this over the phone. I'm coming there, so wait. I'm bringing her back." I heard his labored breathing before he hung up. I put my phone in my bag, my shoulders slumping. No matter what transportation Scott used, it would take at least 2 hours to get from our home to my sister's house. Even if he hurried, we still had plenty of time. "If you want to divorce him, I'll help you," my sister said. "Thanks, I'm going to check on Pamela." When Pamela was younger, she had stayed at this house before. There was a guest room, and Pamela had always liked using it without needing to be told. Around the corner at the end of the hallway, when I opened the door, I caught a faint whiff of that distinctive musty paper smell of books. There was a large bookshelf there with old books lined up. On the lower shelves, next to the Complete Collection series that every household seemed to have back then, was the Encyclopedia series. Pamela had fallen asleep leaning against the window, with a thick butterfly encyclopedia open in front of her. She must have been exhausted. I should let her sleep peacefully now. I returned to the living room without disturbing Pamela, and at my sister's prompting, began discussing our future plans. I absolutely cannot forgive him. Hurting Pamela, no matter what his reasons were, that's absolutely unforgivable. Whether he expresses regret or remorse, whatever Scott might say, I can't bring myself to forgive him. My sister and her husband listened to me with serious expressions. My words might have included some daily grievances too. Starting with complaints about Scott, who had remained unemployed for over 10 years, to his excessive educational methods. Like a confession, I revealed everything about myself, including how I couldn't stop him, to them. After a while, the doorbell rang. When my sister answered, Scott was at the entrance greeting her. When he noticed me, his expression clouded over, and he quickly said, "Let's go home, Jeanette. I'm going to stay here for a while, and I want a divorce." What? Is this because I was strict with Pamela? He used the mild expression, strict, probably because my sister and her husband were present. I didn't strongly correct his choice of words. But I could never forgive him, and felt such hatred that I didn't even want to look at his face. Scott fell silent at the entrance. He stared at his palms, then eventually gave a bitter smile. Pamela has no parents. We're her parent substitutes. It's a parent's sin not to make their child study. Since Pamela's parents who should be blamed for her poor grades are gone. What are you talking about? I don't understand at all. Everything was for Pamela. I know she hates me. But Jeanette, are you going to reject me too? Am I going to be alone again, like that time? That's right, 14 years ago, Scott was fired from his cram school job just because one student's parent complained. He fell into depression and suffered, and it was Pamela who saved him from that darkness. Maybe Pamela had been desperately trying to illuminate Scott's darkness in her heart. I looked up, about to approach Scott. That's when my sister grabbed my arm. Her expression was stern, her gaze suspicious. Enough of this charade. This isn't about being hated or anything like that. We're talking about the violence that left bruises. This has nothing to do with you. This is our family matter. You just used Pamela for your own desires. No reason could justify hurting Pamela. Listen, if you keep pushing this, we'll have to handle this professionally rather than as relatives. Keep that in mind. Scott fell silent, unable to respond. My sister and her husband both work in law enforcement. I didn't want to get Scott in trouble with the police through filing a complaint. While my sister and her husband appeared to be maintaining their composure and responding calmly, anger seemed to be boiling beneath the surface. I had already made up my mind to divorce Scott. Although Scott was very reluctant about the divorce, my sister and her husband helped persuade him. My sister's words about it being better to quietly agree to the divorce rather than having Pamela's case become public seemed to be the deciding factor. Scott reluctantly agreed and left the house after dividing our assets. I heard that Scott now lives in an old apartment. I don't know how he's thinking about his own old age, but I feel a bit sad thinking he might end up alone. After the divorce, Pamela and I returned to our original house and chose to live just the two of us. When I told her she didn't need to study for entrance exams, Pamela showed genuine relief. However, probably due to the trauma she suffered, she doesn't seem to sleep well at night. I think we can slowly consider what to do next while she goes to counseling. She can go to university after she feels settled, or she could get a job. If she doesn't want to do anything, that's fine too. Pamela is still young, she can keep searching, keep wondering, and eventually find her own answers. Another hot summer has come again. Pamela sits quietly on a thin mat laid out on the sun-warmed wooden deck, gazing at the garden. I water the various plants planted around the house with a hose. Aren't you hot? Why don't you go inside? I'm fine. I'm waiting here. Just as I was about to open my mouth to ask for what, Pamela's eyes widened and she stood up. She quickly slipped on her sandals and walked toward the garden, looking up at the sky. Her heels stick out from the faded sandals. When did she get so big? In Pamela's line of sight, 2 black butterflies were fluttering around, eventually settling on the lawn to drink water. Butterflies come to drink water when summer arrives. They occasionally visit from the forest near our house. As Pamela approached the butterflies, they fluttered around her a few times before settling back on the ground to drink from the water droplets. Hey, Grandma, please live a long time. I gently embrace Pamela as she stands there. She has such a delicate frame, I thought I need to feed her more delicious meals from now on. Someday, I will leave this house before her. I wonder what I can do now to make that future, whenever it comes, as painless as possible for Pamela. The butterfly encyclopedia left open on the wooden deck has its pages turned by the wind. Eventually, the 2 butterflies slowly flapped their wings and flew away beyond the fence. As I watched them go, I whispered softly, "It's okay, I'll figure something out."